It's good.
Okay, so yeah, sparse crowd today, but that's okay. Makes it easier. So thanks for coming out. Happy to just go over the summary of the results from the labor market partnership study that we conducted over the course of the past year, in conjunction with our project partners. Next slide. Focus and premise around automation and manufacturing workforce. So yeah, funding was provided for this initiative by the Government of Alberta. So thank you to them for their contribution and for driving this project forward. Next slide. Project partners in the initiative as well. Big thank you to Lethbridge College for this project, and we're interested in engaging as we move through it, and also Richardson Oilseed, our corporate project partner for this initiative too. They were unable to be here today, but send their regrets, and yeah, we're an important part of the project. So ultimately, as we didn't take on full scope of work, we had a project consultant for this initiative, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but we did end up choosing the Conference Board Canada. They have some specialization in this area, particularly based around areas and their vulnerability to changes in work, premised primarily around manufacturing. That's something they released a few years ago, caught our eye, and we thought that they were kind of a natural partner to deliver a project along these kind of lines. And ultimately, we ended up going with them, and they were great to work with. Yeah, so as far as key takeaways for the project, we wanted to look at probing what the barriers were that are impeding investment in productivity enhancing technology in the automation and robotic space. Thank you. Good day, sir. And so that was the primary purpose of what we were looking for. What is going on? What's holding this back? What can we find out, and what can we do next, really? Findings ultimately did suggest that lack of a skilled labor force in this area is in fact holding investment back, at least in the eyes of the participants who responded and were part of the project. The manufacturing companies who offered their perspective on this, that's what their top takeaway was. And moving forward, what was suggested then is that perhaps we look at a focused labor force automation strategy to ensure that we have labor needs that we require to really help this sector thrive, and hopefully to induce more investment in these kind of tools moving forward. It was also noted that perhaps formation of a local industry group would also help create some organization and awareness in the space and really help disseminate the message on those fronts as well. Yeah, so as far as the project rationale goes, I think a few things here are kind of key. Probably doesn't surprise people to know that manufacturing is a major industry importance here. It's one of the core sectors that we focus on here at EDL. But that aside, I mean, the most recent figures we had suggested encompasses about 11% of local GDP. Employed 7,600 people here in the area last year. It's like 1 in every 10 here in Lethbridge working in that sector. So that's elevated compared to both national and provincial benchmarks. It's responsible for about 65% of local exports and export values in the area. And it comprises 1.4 billion dollars in total export value. So we're talking about obviously a major sector here. Most of our major employers are manufacturing based. Many of our big investments in recent years and even moving forward have been also derived from that sector. So it's something that we really wanted to better understand. Obviously, an example of some of the investment in recent years that's been made. I guess another rationale though behind this was we know that this is a sector of importance here, but we also know that there's been a lot of change and disruption in this area recently, right? So it's projected that 20% of the manufacturing workforce will retire within the next 10 years. Couple that with the fact that vacancies have been elevated, you know, both in the post-pandemic period, but perhaps moving forward in sectors like this too, for a variety of reasons. And so finding labor to fill this void has been more and more of a challenge. And we're already seeing that show up as far as wage inflation. Last year, wages in manufacturing were up by approximately 11% here in Lethbridge, which is pretty massive, all things considered, right? Not just compared to CPI, but even just compared to wage inflation overall. That's way over what we would have saw for most positions, right? So it's getting harder to find people. Next slide. On top of this, because of the importance of this sector, the conference board had previously flagged us as an area that was at risk and vulnerable to any disruption in this sector. They were suggesting that we have, their words, somewhat minimal education from a high level macro perspective, coupled with a heavy reliance on this sector, right? So that's a dangerous combination in their mind, and that's why they flagged this originally in the report back in 2021, something that caught our eye, and a big part of the reason why we ended up wanting to work with them.
And were we, for refresher memory, like top 5 most vulnerable?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Southern Alberta, Lethbridge,
Lethbridge, yeah.
is the
They did it based on the CMA, yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that, again, it's a double-edged sword, that the industry is robust and strong here, but at the same point, that creates dangers as far as overall lanes goes.
It's some trouble chats and screens.
Good. Yeah, and of course, the other real impetus spurring this is, so the good news, I guess, you want to look at it from that perspective, is there's a lot more opportunity in this sector than there once was, right? There have been real advancements over the course of the past 10 to 15 years that continue. The area of cobots, automated welders, all sorts of different tools that we can now make use of that we once couldn't, right? So to try and leverage this kind of opportunity, it's important to know what's going on here right now, and what might be holding back investment here in Lethbridge at this point in time in the sector. Yeah, so like I noted before, well, I guess just to explain what we did, so the conference board reached out to large local manufacturers here. We provided them a list, made sure that they remained confidential. They sent them an interview guide ahead of time that outlined the questions they were hoping to ask and the feedback they were looking to get. Each session took approximately 30 to 60 minutes. Relatively rich informational feedback coming from employers who participated, thankfully, which is great. And they were really looking to get at the core of, are you investing in this space? Are you already doing these kind of things? If not, why not? What's holding you back? So the top takeaway that they found was, yes, access to skilled workforce or skilled labor force with the skills to really leverage the use of the kind of tools we're talking about, getting into cobots and some of those new tools. Employers didn't feel like that was there at this point in time, right? And as a result, that's something that can constrain their, I guess, appetite for making investments in this kind of area, right? If you think that your workers aren't really going to be able to make use of the kind of tools that you're thinking about implementing, and of course they come with a cost, then you might sit and pause rather than making investments in that space. Now, just so that we're not throwing ourselves under the bus here and at the expense of others, this is the most commonly cited rationale nationally, right? So this is the top reason across the board, Canada-wide, as to why we're not seeing more investment in this kind of space. Comes up again and again, so it's not like we're alone here, but it is something that we want to be aware of. So, hand in hand with that, employers also did flag that they didn't think that there were access to local training supports that could help fill the void for them in the event that they were looking for places to train individuals, right? And that's not, certainly trying to throw shade at any local organizations that are in the business of providing training. That's not it. It's just a here and now thing. At this point, it was something that they viewed as a potential constraint as well. Not something that can't be overcome or addressed, but at this point in time, viewed as a barrier by local. Just before we fly through and get to what the results were, some of the other results were, other barriers, just in case people were interested, there were some that were also cited, include organizational readiness, elevated wages required for specialized workers here locally. So those who would be leveraging those technologies cost quite a bit, and there is some hesitancy among employers to make a commitment to bringing those kind of staff into. And assessing the return on investment and the payback period for the integration of technologies. That again is a national issue. There's still some question with regards to how much people are going to get out of the tools that they invest in. Are they ultimately spending money on tools that they might not be able to leverage the maximum potential? And as a result, do they move forward with something like that, especially in the current high, if you want to call it, interest rate environment that we're in right now? Something else that and give pause for thought to employers thinking about investing in it. So then what can we do? What did the report suggest? Really what it suggested is now that we've identified some of the players, we've come up with the overarching rationales behind why things are the way they are. But to really move forward with things, we need a more nuanced labor force strategy specific to the automation sector. To really understand what we need here from a number of people perspective, how long will take to get it, clear goals, clear timelines as far as when and how we're going to address that, what our strategy is going to be. Without that, it's hard to know where things would go. Targets like that really do help drive next steps and help ensure that we're moving closer to the goals that we're all looking to achieve. Next slide. It was also suggested that we form a local industry group. Something else that came up in the course of the presentation was that there was just a lack of awareness among many employers, not surprisingly. Companies are busy focusing on many other things, getting qualified staff there, dealing with a host of changes in the labor market world and new HR requirements. Lots going on, right? Whether or not potential grants and sources of funding to really help move this forward is on the top of everyone's radar is tough to say. Didn't seem like it though, based on the feedback we got. So perhaps an industry group could step in, kind of fill that void, help stay on top of some of that labor market planning, help disseminate information about potential sources of funding or training options that might be promising, and really help drive some of the discussion on those kind of fronts here too, right? There was previously an industry group here in Lethbridge that was active, but I don't believe it's been all that active in recent years, although maybe, okay, there you go. It's confirmation here.
But that's okay.
So yeah, so those were just some of the higher level recommendations that were made in the report. There are others, and please feel free to go through the report and take a look, but those were some of the ones that really stuck out and caught our attention as we worked through this project too. And yeah, ultimately, what are we doing? Well, we want to remain competitive here as a city, right? And as an area. And there are other places, it's something else that is identified, and there are charts in the report that you can look to as well. Many of the other large urban centers in the prairies already have programming along these kind of lines in their center, which put them at a competitive advantage, right? Not only, Edmonton and Calgary, but also Red Deer, Saskatoon, places along those kind of lines. Really, it's scattered through bigger centers in the prairies, right? And so we want to remain competitive. We know this is industry of importance for us, and we think that we want to continue to maintain, a position at the vanguard when it comes to labor force skills and the skilled workforce that we really hope can help this sector continue to thrive here in Lethbridge. So that's about it. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts? Just kind of a high level take on things. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Discovered that I'm not early years. I'm like, yep.
Did you do any work in what the pipeline for labor would be out of the high schools?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I think that information does exist. We didn't get into it with that level of granularity there, no. The high schools, no, I guess the short answer is no, other than to say that we're aware of some of the initiatives that are going on here that tie into robotics, like the first robotics program that's been in play for years. But as far as number of individuals or interest at that level, no, but that's a really interesting angle that is worth pursuing.
I don't know if you know Judy Stokes-Ingram.
Yes, I do.
And
yeah,
she'd be the one to talk to you about that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's a great idea.
So Adrian, if I just ask you, Mike talked about the premium that some of these folks require, without getting into your business specifically, but all of that seemed to resonate with you, like
100%.
all the same barriers. Okay. So the findings align kind of through experience. So,
Our main one is very general labor, but we do start to get into any specifics. It is very expensive, and it's also so competitive in the market. We all need them, right? So we hire someone and then it's like 50 cents more on the other places, so they just bounce around because it's their market. It's very hard to also retain people because anything that anything extra will like happen because there's market for that, right? So.
And I asked, obviously collapsed, but was very convenient for us to hit the 26 or 28 largest industrial entities. Any thoughts on maybe why it wasn't successful, or what? Because again, if one of the recommendations is to reform essentially what already didn't work, I'm curious to know what we would do differently.
I think there should be another ISM with a different angle. What I know about, I guess it was funded a long time ago, and it was more to drive utility rates.
I was very focused on electrical.
Very, so then I don't think there was very directed by the same group for that, and they saw many other that electric for us, so many other manufacturers that utilities are an important part, but not the main one. We lost interest too, like, so people started dropping out of meetings because meetings were not directed to the main issues kind of thing. But then another conversation have been driving to like, okay, we need one, we need someone to represent, we need a group, we need a voice, how do we, the policies look like, so we're working on that. But again, it's pretty, once you narrow it down to be like, okay, let's make a group, but then what?
Next week, valuable.
How do they use to be valuable, how do you bring people into valuable, and then we're like, maybe we need like 3 meetings a year, and that's it, and you bring her into that, and you just exchange information and bring the guests, not just something different, but we're.
I guess like, you know,
We need someone different, someone different, yeah, exactly.
Some just to add to that, something that came up, really an example of where that kind of thing could be useful here was collaborative training, right? Because a lot of companies have training needs, but they don't have the budget to necessarily go along on those fronts. And if they do, it would be costly. So if there was somebody to help bring some organization through that process, and then take that information, feedback, and then provide it to other stakeholders who might be interested. That's an example of something that companies might not do on their own, but if somebody else was there to help guide that process.
I guess the struggle is who joins the group and who has those, so we reach out to the people who are making those decisions, right? Like it's people who are attending ISM, we're not necessarily, we're kind of like, well, you go, but then really the information is lost, and like, so it's like actually targeting the person who's gonna come to those, and then yes, training, for example, I can think of lean training. We can get like a big group, like all the manufacturers, training a group of people in Lethbridge, that would be amazing. But how do we reach out to like all the industrial, it's an animal, and it's like silence. So it's hard, that engagement is not true, so we have to reconnect that and like, kind of like, taking it up a little.
There's also a competitive aspect, like,
Yeah.
Totally, I understand.
yeah,
We don't have
That's
peaceful.
what we look at myself.
Exactly, which is definitely us.
like you all need these employees, you all need the training. But at what point do we get people together to say, okay, let's just do it? And then stop hoarding what we have so that we can hopefully get more.
And honestly, it's harder to do that with companies that are more multinational or work in specific sectors because there's just risk there, versus places who are maybe Lethbridge based or have more of a presence here from an organizational ownership or managerial level, then it's a little more palatable to think that way. But for sure, there are some players, if we're being realistic, we just won't be part of that conversation because they.
Yeah, and I realize also it's a lot of generational for locals. Like, first owners were very private in this, and then newer generations, I'm like, let's stop, let's connect, how are you doing it? So that those conversations help, but yeah, you're right, there's a lot of things at play for sure.
Jason, obviously you were a part of this report and I've seen some of the findings along the way. Is there anything that stood out to you as one of the key delivery entities in our community of similar training and programming?
Yeah, when I was going through the report, and this is something we face all the time, is every manufacturer uses different systems.
Right.
And so trying to kind of suss out what are the common skills underneath those from a training perspective, like what do people need in order to use all of the systems? Because people tend to be looking for their specific system training, which is just not overly effective or competitive. And we can't build programming around that, right? So that's a really interesting one to go like, how do we solve that?
I think if you train for adaptability, for them to like, okay, these are the things you need to learn in the basic, and then just find it's very easy to find the system. So if they know the background of like, okay, this is the steps we're gonna need, or this is what you need to know about it, then it's very easy to train. So just like, train them to adapt, give them cases where like, okay, this is the case right now, this company that has this, what do you do? Like, and then this is completely different. So it's kind of all this under the same production, but like train them to be adaptable and not, don't, that's what we find that, like, I was trained on this one, and then you show them something different and they're panicking. Same thing, it's just a different button. Instead of here, it's here, but it's the same principle.
Sorry.
You guys don't say.
It's pipeline to me, like we talk about people that need training. Well, what's the training exactly? We have to figure that out. And then who provides the training? I don't care who provides the training, as long as, I don't care if it's you or the university or vocational schools or what. Like, what is the skill that needs to happen? And then we need like the pipeline of kids in high school to see that this is a viable career. Like, if we can have, if they can understand the whole system of how it works, then learning each individual one at a company is easy.
They need to know how to function within the organization with the soft skills and the general knowledge. And then it should be transportable, and you teach them how to use your equipment, you teach them how to use your stuff, you teach them how to use your stuff. And then they can function within that system. Right, but building that pipeline, building that mindset.
Yeah, that's the idea based on a lot of the training we see. Although,
Yeah.
Jason, your point is that it's definitely valid, right? A lot of the training in this kind of space that exists elsewhere. Some other post-secondary type providers, it would be things like PLCs or SCADA systems, or introduction to circuits or control systems, things like that are higher level, and pneumatics and hydraulics. But eventually, yeah, I mean, companies will always want somebody to train as closely to their system as possible. There is definitely a bit of a disconnect sometimes between training for skill and then training for specific program. Right? The idea is if somebody's familiar with it, though, to your point, that they'll be able to learn, and the amount of time it would take to train on some sort of proprietary system in theory would be much faster than it's something that they're coming in cold with and haven't really had much exposure to.
And a lot of the youth are entering the workforce, they don't have the confidence to work in ambiguity. Right,
Exactly.
so we can build that confidence, give them those skills early, be able to adapt her.
Yeah.
We see that from high school kids that are coming. They are used to being behind the screen, right? So they're great at like, and they adapt really quick to a new system. But social skills or a conversation, follow instructions, or how to even report to the supervisor, and how like that kind of like completely unaware, like completely like, hey, this is a phone line, the night line, you phone here. You phone or we text. Pick up the phone, it's like the completely like disconnect, like it's, yeah, so we're trained to adapt, but at the same time, they need to understand how, like that part of like, again, skills, soft skills, interview, eye contact, this or something, like that part is, it's lost, like absolutely. I think this is the first contact, when this is their first job. What, like, that is a shock. They have the skill, they have they understand, they have the knowledge of what it will take, and they know some of the manufacturing side of it, but so it's very hard. So supervisors, like, they won't connect with me, they don't do eye contact, they don't talk to me, they don't, we need to teach them, so that will be great training too,
Yeah,
those skills.
big problem with that part is nobody wants to pay for it. Right, I want to pay you to train my person to do this job, not how to maintain eye contact.
Oh, for sure. Actually, something else, just to piggyback on that, those flagged in this report, is that a lot of the candidates who might be well positioned to receive training are still in need of English training, right? Some of the companies view as real contenders for this kind of material still have to equate themselves with English in a way that would make them logical recipients of this kind of information. So that in itself is a bit of a constraint.
Maybe I can just pick up on one of the other thing I'm curious about is one of the other sort of manufacturing sector skill gaps were identified was computer-aided design, analytical software, enterprise resource planning, and business intelligence, and sort of data analysis, all of which have fairly long lead time training times. Again, from what you see in the market locally, does that make sense that those are things, Adrian has, sorry, you happen to be sitting beside me. You know, well, perhaps Emerson online, you know, is analytical software, is computer aided design, is ERP type skills something you would hire internally, or is that something you, because Lethbridge is a small market, which is contract to consultant, contract to project, like enterprise resource planning in my previous life was like rolling out SAP. Well, that's usually much bigger than a local company. Like, I don't know if that's something we would develop, but I see like business intelligence and data analysis as being something, well, maybe that makes sense, that we could filter and target. Right?
We don't have many positions to fulfill those roles, so we usually outsource and then internally we just have someone during the projects, right? Like when it's that big, we totally,
When it does, all just a CDO. Right?
yeah. I like outsource and then bring, yes. We did that for SAP, for example, for our system, our CRM, and we outsourced. And then we just did internal changes, but we hired necessarily someone with those skills, we bring them.
Because the university's just implemented a new masters of management that's around a data analytics degree, master's degree. You know, then most of the candidates are coming from outside of Lethbridge and have no intention of staying. So it's a great program. But again, I don't see that as necessarily addressing a local manufacturing need per se.
Okay.
They have a certificate program too, don't they? For that?
I believe so, yeah.
You know if it's eligible for Canada Alberta job grants?
I would assume I don't think that's true.
Because it's an accredited program, right? So
Yeah.
unless you're taking it non-accredited.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right now, just to follow up on that, part of the problem is it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? So it was flagged here again, that the training costs and bringing in external expertise also is usually higher. And if it's a one-time thing, okay, right? If you're learning a software program, fine. But if you're trying to incorporate something in your day-to-day manufacturing processes, it might not be that realistic to bring others in that frequently, and that in itself might hold things back. But on the flip side, the opportunity for workers usually is in labor markets that have already made more strides, perhaps in some of these countries, right? So trying to attract them here is harder because there's more perceived opportunity for them in markets where this kind of thing is already being implemented and where the potential for work is maybe just at least perceived as being higher than it is here. So that also is something that can make it challenging to then find and attract individuals, because most people are looking for depth of the labor market if they have specialized skills. And if they view there as being limited opportunities, and that's something else that can be a push factor that would keep them elsewhere rather than attracting them somewhere.
I think this is like gap I'm finding with what you're talking, is when you're talking about manufacturing, where we think of the problem for hiring or shortage, is what you mentioned is very, we have a couple of positions, but I don't think of manufacturing per se, what keeps running every day. What keeps running is people on the floor with the skills, right? Like that is the hard part, to get to train to that people. And then the positions that we have specific, then in my experience, we either move them from gallery or we bring them in and then we do the attraction and they stay and then they stay for a long time. Like that hasn't been the hard part, sure finding, and we have local companies here doing bringing people in for interviews and everything, but that hasn't been that tricky. Like they usually, there's people with skills that are there. It's more of the layer that when you're thinking like manufacturing for me is the growth, like the big amount of like people are down in the floor. That's where I go to, like, right? Like for me, that's a challenge.
Also-
Down there.
So a couple things there, actually. What we've heard from at least some, let's call them service providers in this area, is that they could be doing more work, but it actually is tricky for them to find the individuals with the skills to actually work on those kind of projects, right? So that limits the scope of work that perhaps they can take part in within this space.
Right.
But that's more on the design side, less on like the pure manufacturing side. On that side of things, though, there does seem to be more turnover for those positions, like material handlers, forklift drivers, certainly a big need for welders and things like that here right now, right? So I mean, a lot of those areas seem to recycle and turn people over pretty quickly. And perhaps solutions like this, if everyone felt good about them and felt like they understood what they were doing and training was okay, maybe would be a solution that would help minimize some of those turnovers at the front line.
So
We did the project with the trucking industry, trying to ascertain why people don't want to be truck drivers. Unattractive job, it's not really something that young people want to do. But going through that process, the career path, how do I get from being the truck driver to being the owner of a company or being a dispatch manager or something more professional within the industry? And that was always a challenge. If they had the skills, they could move into that. If they don't have the skills, they generally would fall out, go work in the kitchen, go work in labor, go do something, right? But there's some parallels there. It's learned a few things from findings from that report.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's a really good point too.
It is manufacturing the destination that most of these people are planning on having for the rest of their life. How do we get them into the company and promote them within to development to
And I think in a
be the
perfect
people that are
world,
running the company one day?
when we're looking at some of these new kind of skills, if we think the industry is gonna change and individuals are at the forefront of the skill transition, then they're probably best positioned to move forward in the industry is the hope, right?
Yeah.
That's, yeah, the hard to make it happen necessarily, but that would be, I think, a perfect outcome if it could be attained.
Yeah. It's last thought about that, but you get the technical skills and you're good at doing your job on the floor and you become the soft skill master. You learn how to give feedback, coach and develop people. You become the supervisor, team lead, whatever, and you move up. And maybe that's the career path that you take. You don't move into an accounting job within the company. You don't have that skill set, but building that path within the career.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Pathways and upward mobility are definitely important and top of mind, I think, for most employees. So,
Because otherwise, they just come back and forth.
yeah,
I think I saw your employees come over to my place and you saw my employees go to your place and I saw everybody else's employees go back and forth. It's the same 5,000 people just rotating.
Totally.
Yeah. And that's the labor pool, I think. Of those guys.
no, that's a really good point. Yeah. Any other thoughts? If not, it's probably good to wind things up.
Any comments or thoughts online, Emerson or Sydney, in terms of the report you've heard or anything you think we need to do with it moving forward?
No, I'm just sitting here enjoying the conversation. Yeah, I think I'm at Whole Leaf, just outside of Coaldale here. So we just grow lettuce. So my biggest takeaways from here is I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff. It's difficult to find new youth entering the workforce that want to stick around with heavy manual labor jobs. In the greenhouse, we get up to about 50 degrees Celsius, high humidity, and a lot of the workforce are immigration here. So we get a lot of people from Nepal and Kenya that stick around. But any youth that we hire that are local to Lethbridge, they usually last maybe 3 months, 4 months before they don't want to do it anymore. So I think we see a lot of the labor force. Again, kind of to that comment of them wanting to grow in a company or own their own company. I think the growing labor force is very ambitious about self-reliance, being able to own their own companies and run their own lives how they want to. And I think that puts a large damper on manufacturing and on these manual labor jobs because they want to do something on their own in the future, and they kind of see it as a barrier to that instead of a stepping stone to growing and to becoming something bigger in a company. So that's definitely something that I've seen here at Whole Leaf for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for me, Simi here, speaking with Daniela. We're more technology in the mining space. For me, I'm just really learning lots from the conversation as regards to the industry in Lethbridge and as regards to the skilled force. Hiring really is hiring the right skill set, right, as regards to using systems and technology, I think is really a challenge across industry as regards to local. I think Emerson really drove a point as regards to bringing in hired skills from outside of Lethbridge and seeing them stay longer than hiring locally. But the conversation so far has been really insightful. And if for us, it's really about exploring, I know Mike mentioned opportunities that are available as regards to maybe grant supports and what industry supports are actually out there for new players who are looking to come into the industry as regards to bringing in business opportunity. That's really my main focus. And yeah, the conversation has been very insightful and thanks for giving us this incredible insights into the manufacturing sector in Lethbridge. And we're certainly looking at how we can certainly at some point be part of it and seeing how we can contribute and see growth in Lethbridge and see the workforce in Lethbridge be impacted positively for sure.
Thanks, Cindy, and thanks for attending today. I appreciate you being here. So thank you.
One last question. Was there anything about apprenticeships in the research that was done and how apprenticeships tie into everything?
Nothing like that came up, but it's a really good point. It's been a hot topic, I'd say, lately in the workforce world. How to get people exposure to something, help them see whether it's something that they might enjoy or like, and find funding and opportunities to make those kind of things happen. Because yeah, I mean, I think everybody benefits if somebody can go through something for, say, 6-8 weeks, figure out if it's something they really enjoy or not. If they don't, no real skin off their back, they haven't made major investments, same from the company side. But it would still provide them with that kind of exposure to see what things are like on a day-to-day basis. So there isn't much in the report, I would say, on that, but it's an important area of focus for sure. That could bring a different dimension to this kind of research.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's go. We're good.
It's my great work.
No, thanks very much.
Thank you.
No problem.